We left off last video refactoring our location cell and hooking up our navigation link so you can go to the location detail view. In this video, we're going to build this profile screen that you see here. But because we are still just building the basic UI, I'm going to issue another challenge. See if you can build it yourself. There's only two parts that may be like a little tricky, and that is this top part because it's a Z stack and an H stack with multiple V stacks. Like you get all the stacks. So good practice there. And then getting this number to change as you type and then change to red as you get into the negatives. This was the first time I had built that functionality when I built this project. So maybe that'll trip you up a little bit. But it actually shows off how cool declarative UI can be. It's actually not that bad to do in Swift UI. So go ahead, build this on your own, take the challenge if you want, or don't. I'm not your dad, do whatever you want. But we will go ahead and start building it now. And then if you did the challenge, we can compare and contrast our code and discuss it in the comments. So pulling up the design, we're gonna break down the screen real quick. Overall, it's a V-stack, just like our location detail view was. But let's really narrow in on this top profile part. So what we got here is the Z stack, kind of like the base layer, kind of that secondary system color background. That's just to separate it visually. I didn't have that in the beginning, but I kind of added that to the design at the end because I felt it, again, visually separated things. So now that's the base layer of the Z stack. On top of that, we have an H stack. And on the left side of the H stack, we got our profile picture thing. And then on the right side, we have a V stack of our first name, last name, company, right? And I should point out the profile image, that is also a Z stack as well, because we have our avatar image view that we're gonna reuse. And then you can see the little edit button. That is an image on top of that in a Z stack. So that is the breakdown of that. That's how we're gonna build that. And then the rest is essentially just a V stack. Nothing crazy going on there with a spacer in between the button and the rest of the elements. So that is the breakdown of the design. Let's get to it here. So like I said, the overall screen is the V stack. So that's what we're going to start with. And then the top part is a Z stack, right? And for this base layer of the Z stack, we're actually going to do a color. And that again is going to be .system background, secondary system background. I guess I should start typing secondary there. Now you can see it filled up my whole screen. That's not what we want. I mean, you can kind of barely see it, but we want to give it a frame. We only want to give it a height, and we're going to give it a height of 130. So we are hard coding this height because again, based on the design, we're not going to have to like stretch this out. Maybe when we get to the dynamic type section, depending on how we decide to adapt this to dynamic type, this may change. But for now, again, baby steps, building the initial UI, we're gonna hard code the height to 130. And then I wanna give it a corner radius of 12, get that rounded corner look. And then now you can see it is squished up to the edges. We don't want that. Let's give it some padding. And again, just the horizontal. I don't want the vertical padding. And then in our, for now, in our V stack here, let's add that spacer just so we can get the look of this being pushed up to the top. And this will be in a navigation view. So using the lesson we learned last time, we're not gonna put this in a navigation view from the start. We're gonna wrap this preview in a navigation view here. And so maybe you might be wondering something because I know the future of this course, you may not. So let me do this real quick. On this V stack, I want to say navigation title and then profile, right? That's the look we want. Now, the reason you may think, well, hey, we're coming to this screen from a tab bar, right? So we can just put the navigation view on this V stack, right? Because it's not in a navigation view previously, right? Looking at the design, you hit the profile tab, there you are, we're not in a navigation view. That would be that use case. However, later on, we're going to do onboarding, right? When somebody first opens up the app, they have to create their profile. So we have an onboarding flow in which we reuse this profile screen. And in that onboarding flow, we are in a navigation view. So again, I know the future, and I did run into that issue before. So if you're wondering why we don't just put it here, that is why. And then we do have some logic later on in the course that says, hey, if you're coming from onboarding, don't show a navigation view. If you're not coming from onboarding, go ahead and show the navigation view. So we'll touch on that later. But in case that alarm bell was ringing off in your head, that's why we didn't do that. And just a quick note on that, because I do want to be empathetic to like, well, of course, Sean, you know the future, so you built it that way. But when you build it the first time, you don't know the future. So I do want to reiterate, like, I messed it up. I did build it with the profile view, and then when I built my onboarding screen, I ran into that double navigation view issue that we ran into last video. So then I had to go back and build that logic. You know, when you're building an app, you don't have the entire thing fully mapped out and then you just code it perfectly the first time. There's a whole bunch of trial and error, back and forth, and I try to keep some of that stuff in these videos so maybe you're just learning, you don't get the impression that you have to have everything planned out before you code. So that is why I do kind of leave these mistakes in there, go back and fix them. I feel like that really gives a better view of what development's really like. So no, you don't have to have everything planned out in the beginning. Okay, back to the code. Okay, so the next element in our Z stack, right? We have our base layer, this secondary background. We want our H stack. Stack. And the first element in our H stack is our profile view. So it's our avatar view, and it should take a size, right? Yeah. Eventually, we're going to be passing in more stuff into this, but for now, just the size, and it is 84. Again, just dial that number in. So that is the first element in our H stack, and that's going to be all the way to the left. Actually, let's go ahead and add this real quick, our Z stack. Let's go ahead and finish the whole avatar view here, right? So we're putting this in a Z stack because we want that edit image on top of it, because this whole thing is going to be tappable, right? So you don't have to tap the edit button, but the edit button's there just to let people know they can edit it. So this whole picture is going to be tappable to pull up the photo picker and select your photo. So anyway, on top of this, we want an image, and then again, system name, because we're going to use SF symbols. And if I tab over to my SF symbols, is it right up front? I think it's called edit. Again, some of these names, they're just not what you would think they'd be. Like you would think that would be the edit button. It's not. Pencil, I think I typed. Yeah. See, here it is right there. Square.and.pencil. So that's what I want. So copy name, back to Xcode, and paste that string into there. And then there you can see it's dead center. It's not what we want, right? We want to, well, first of all, we want to make it foreground color .white to hopefully stand out against like an actual image. And then we also want to push it down a little bit. So in order to move views around kind of like within, V stacks, H stacks, all that stuff, you can do .offset. And then here you just get an X and a Y. Well, we only want to move it down. Well, you can kind of see it moved it down and to the right. We only want to move it down so we can get rid of the whole X thing. And then 10 is not enough. 32 is the number. Maybe it was 28. You see, I'm just kind of like dialing it in. And I actually think I wanted to make it a little smaller because I wanted it to fit in this space under the profile little person thing in the green. See how doesn't really fit in there? So I did make it smaller. So dot resizable. And again, this is kind of the design stuff that you do. We don't want it to be like that. So scale to fit. And then I did give it a frame of 14 by 14, and then we don't need alignment. So I did want to make it smaller. And then now, I knew I had 32 in my head for some reason. Now I did 32, maybe it's even 30. Trying to get it dead center in there. So you see, that's the kind of like little design tweaks I'm talking about that like when you're building it, that's like really when you dial it in. So that is the first element of our H stack. We have our basically profile image. We're eventually going to put a tap gesture on this Z stack so you can tap it and make stuff happen. Again, one step at a time. So the other part of our H stack is going to be our V stack of, first name, last name, company. So we're going to make a V stack here. And it's going to be a text field, not just text, text field. And then that is initialized with a localized string and a binding to something, right? Because as we're typing, we have to save the value into a variable or property. So the localized string is going to say first name, and then we need to create. We're going to be creating a bunch of these here at state private var first name, and we're going to initialize that as an empty one, and then I'm going to copy and paste this a few times because we're going to need first name, last name, company, bio, right? So Command C, so last name, company name, bio. That's what we're going to need on this screen. So I'll go ahead and change this to last name, company name, and bio. And if you know me, you know what I got to do, right? I can't be having these jagged equal signs. Personal preference, I say this every course. You don't have to do this if you don't like it. Some people hate it. Some people love it. Do you? But that's what I'm going to do. So now in my first name text field, I want a binding to first name. Hit try again on my preview. We should start to see this come together a little bit. Now you see, once we added our H stack, it pushed everything over. So one tricky thing about Swift UI, if you're coming from UIKit, right? If you're coming from a UI kit, you're probably used to building this secondary background color that we did, and then all the other views are like inside of that view, and then you like pin all your constraints inside of that view. So with UI, it's a little different. Again, we're dealing with layers. So our HStack is just sitting on top of that secondary system background view. It's not actually like inside of it. So really our HStack doesn't have the padding. So that's why we need to give the overall HStack here some padding. And I don't mind having the vertical padding here too. So you can see that made the padding equal to here. However, we want to go a little farther on our image, like just the image, right? Because we want to indent it a little bit. Like the whole point of this background view is to kind of group these views together. So on the avatar view, right, the image here, we're going to do dot padding, and then we're only going to do dot leading, and then of 12. Right, you see I pushed it in a little bit there. And again, this is just dialing it in. And like I've said before, I just want to reiterate this. We're going to come back and like refactor all these screens. Again, this is part of the process. When I'm just building this UI, and again, I know I'm repeating myself, like I don't care about clean code just yet. I just want to get my UI working. And then again, once it's built and done, then I can go back, look at the work and be like, okay, let's clean this up. And I can like intelligently refactor rather than trying to like refactor now and mess things up. So that's the process in case you're looking at your screen, yelling at the code like, no, you can put padding on the overall Z. I get it. We'll come back. So let's keep building. And I know I keep repeating myself, but hey, whatever. So, okay, our text field, we want to format this a little bit because we want this big and bold, right? If you look at the design, I like that big, bold name feel. So we'll do text, and here we're not going to do like title, headline, because for now, and we may revisit this in the dynamic type portion of the course, I don't necessarily, I'm not text, I want font. I don't necessarily want this to be adjustable to dynamic type because this is already going to be big, bold, and chunky. So dot system, and I'm going to do 32, dot bold, and then we don't need anything on the design here. So now you see my first name, big, bold, chunky, that's what we wanted. And then I do want, line limit 1, because again, I don't want this to be 10 lines long if people type something super long. But if they do type something super long, I want to do the minimum scale factor 0.75, so it will shrink that before it truncates. So that is the first name. And I just noticed something. Maybe you noticed it before. But our edit button is now off-centered because I put this padding just on the image. So if I want to cut that now, I want to put this on the whole Z stack. So that was the mistake. Eventually, we're going to refactor out this whole Z stack and call this like profile image. So that padding will be on that. So now that fixed that. And then while we're at it, the first name in the profile image looks a little cramped. So on our H stack overall here, we can just, again, add that spacing and we'll do 16. Just to let it breathe a little bit. I don't like things being too cluttered. So we have first name. All we're going to do for the last name is copy this text field, paste it down here. And obviously it's not the first name, it is the last name because it is the same thing. And then who knows, maybe later we'll refactor this repetitive code out into its own view. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. And then the last part is text field, company name, and that is bound to company name. And we're not going to make company name bigger because, again, the look, we want the name, and then the company is kind of like a little subtitle for their company. Now, if you look at our VStack on the first name, last name, company name, it's a little bit spread out. Doesn't look that great, right? It makes the overall padding on the background or the ZStack base layer, the secondary system thing, just makes it look cramped. So what we can do in this VStack here, spacing, and then we're going to give it the old 1 to bring that together. So you can see how that brought that closer. Looks a lot better. Looks all contained in there. Now, I want to show you something because the last thing we're going to do on this VStack is add some trailing padding. Padding dot trailing and comma 16. Now, the reason we did that, I'm going to comment it out and show you what would happen. Let me go ahead and run this preview. I think I can type in here. So what's going to happen is if I do Sean and then like a really, really long name, like you see how it goes all the way to the edge of the thing. There's no like padding on the, that base layer of the ZStack, the secondary system background. So that's why when we add padding trailing 16, you're going to see, and now when I type something, it's going to keep that padding right there on the right, no matter how long it is. Okay, we're not truncating. Okay, there it goes. There it truncates. So you can see that's the text thing in action. It will shrink it to 75%, and then we'll truncate if somebody has 38 Ds in their name. Okay, so we'll stop that. So this top portion is good to go. So we're going to pause right here and come back for part 2 of the profile screen. We're pulling up the design. We're going to handle our bio entry and then change the color of the number as it counts down. And then we're going to build that button down there. So I don't want these videos to be like 40 minutes long. So that's why I'm going to break this up. So come back for part 2 of the profile screen. See you in a second.